Welcome back, it's me, Lou. I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review, and today we are jumping into the time machine and traveling way back to 2018 as we take a look at DC Collectibles Batman Black and White, and this is the Jim Lee version. Okay, so this action figure was produced by DC Collectibles. It's DC's own line of action figures and memorabilia. This here was to celebrate 20 years of, I believe, I think Batman Black and White, or 20 years of DC Collectibles. Oh, okay, this was to celebrate 20 years of DC Collectibles, which came out back then in 1998. If you're familiar with the DC line of action figures known as DC Icons, you're going to feel very much at home with this action figure line. For one, it utilizes the same kind of packaging, and I think the action figures also are kind of in scale with DC Collectibles' other action figures. So this is a pretty cool version of Batman. So this is the black and white version, and it's inspired by the artwork by Jim Lee. Over here there's a description. It says, from the vision of master artist Jim Lee comes this 6 3/4 Batman black and white action figure based on Lee's art from the legendary comic book event Batman Hush. So I was trying to do some homework on this, and I think there might have been also a actual like normal version of this figure where it's just actually plain colored. It's actually Batman in his blue and gray and yellow costume. But since this belongs to the black and white series of figures, there's actually a description right here. The Batman black and white action figure line brings to life interpretations of the world's greatest detective and select Gotham City characters in glorious monochrome from the comic industry's brightest stars. So this almost kind of feels in line with DC Collectibles' designer series. And in the designer series, for example, I think there was a Jay Lee line of designer series, and then with that you get different interpretations of, like, I think Batman and Catwoman, but through the eyes of Jay Lee. And it was like, they take those 2D versions that were seen in the comic books and it kind of bring them to life in action figure form, and that's what essentially this line is. They have different interpretations of Batman. For example, we have the original Batman design by Bob Kane. We had, at the time, this was the current Batman artist in 2018. We had Greg Capullo. And, much like the Jim Lee figure, these are all versions of Batman, but presented in black and white. Initially, when I saw this action figure, I thought this was based off of the old Batman black and white comic, which I have right here. If you're a long-time comic book reader, you'll remember that occasionally DC would do this line of comic books called Batman Black and White. And essentially, it's kind of like an anthology series. They would take some of comic books, legendary or brightest industry stars, and then they would, present like a bunch of short stories featuring Batman. For example, the cover here is actually drawn by Jim Lee and Scott Williams, and this was just a really cool idea. These are all short stories. For example, here's a story by Bruce Timm, if you're familiar with Batman and the animated series and his involvement in that. And it's just a cool idea. It's just really cool to see Batman in a very raw form with black and white line artwork. Here we have a story by legendary artist Joe Kubert. And there's some other cool stuff going on in here. So Batman Black and White would come out, I think, for at least what I remember, it was always a 4-issue miniseries. And it came out a couple of times, I think throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. I don't know if they still do Batman Black and White, but I do know you could buy collected editions of this, like in hardcover form, trade paperback, and I think also like You know, if you're a digital reader, you can get this probably like through Comixology. All right, so let's get started with the black and white version of the Jim Lee Batman. So one of the reasons why I picked up this figure recently was about the time when I got this was a few months back, actually, when McFarlane Toys released their Hush 2-pack that came with Batman and Hush, and it was like with the Jason Todd gravestone like display base. And I was kind of like itchy for like Hush action figures and Jim Lee inspired Batman designs, so I kind of hunted this one down. I got this for a really reasonable price too. I think I got it for, I want to say maybe $19 on the secondary market. And I don't remember how to open up these boxes. Just give me a moment. Alright, this is going to be a mess. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't want to destroy the packaging, so I'm just going to be kind of careful about this. Okay. Alright, we have the cardboard insert, Batman black and white. Alright, so this is where it gets confusing. Okay, so... Alright, I know I'm being crazy. Alright, so the box described this as being the Jim Lee Hush Batman, but at the same time you're getting the Batman black and white logo that's from the comic book. So, I don't know. I think there might be a little bit of disconnect there. Alright, so this dude comes with a large display base, as you can see. And then here's the action figure. And with the action figure, you get a black and white Batman display base. Alright, so when I was taking this figure out of the package, I was really impressed by the material on the cape. The cape, it's a very soft rubber, very thin also. And as you can see, super flexible. It's a lot lighter and a lot softer than some of the capes we get from modern action figures, like, you know, the McFarlane stuff. Like the box described, this guy's 6 3/4. Actually, he's a little bit taller than that. He's closer to 7 inches. For a size comparison next to a McFarlane figure, here's the McFarlane designed Batman. You can see much larger scale. And I actually really like this black and white monochromatic look of the action figure. It's really cool. It has like a different sense to it. It feels a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more elegant. The articulation is very dated by today's standards. You know, as you can see there, it's only like a single pinned elbow, single pinned knee, and it's kind of one of those oddball things too where the legs aren't straight at the legs aren't coming straight at you. It's almost the feet are almost perpendicular to one another, as you can see here. And there is no like thigh cut or thigh swivel, so you can't adjust this leg. You know, this is pretty much how the figure is gonna, you know, stand. You know, so the feet are kind of perpendicular to one another. So this is much more of a display piece than it is something, you know, to be played with. Um, I've said this before in other videos. There's certain action figures that just because they have articulation doesn't meant that they're meant to be played with or they're meant to be articulated. This feels like it's almost like a small statue that just happens to have a little bit of articulation in it. Like I don't even know if I could take the arms and move them outward because I don't think there's articulation for that. I think they could only go up and down and elbows bend. Likewise with the head, I think it's on a ball joint, but it doesn't really want to dip down or look up. And I think there is no waist swivel. So the sensibilities of this action figure is very different. But keep in mind, this is from 2018. It's a very nice piece. I think this is kind of aimed more so at the time, the serious action figure collector. I think back in 2018, your options were, if you wanted something in this scale, was either DC Collectibles or, Mattel with their DC Classics. And if you wanted posability, you'd really lean more towards the Mattel line of action figures. But the, DC Collectibles, it's kind of like the successor to DC Direct. And, those were products that were produced by DC that were meant for the direct market, meaning, straight to like comic book stores and specialty stores. So you're looking at something that you'd find like maybe like at a, back in the day, a Tower Records or an FYE or even a GameStop possibly. Or maybe even, I think, a Barnes and Noble. I think they might have carried some DC Collectibles back in the day. Overall, it's a really clean sculpt. You could definitely see the Jim Lee influence. It has Jim Lee's kind of like square jaw on Bruce Wayne. Has the similar emblem. The proportions are very much in line with Jim Lee's Batman, as is the musculature. Here's the utility belt. Overall, it's a very nice piece. And since this is Batman in black and white, if you wanted to, if you're a customizer, you could easily just color the utility belt yellow and just add a flesh tone. And then the figure, it almost look like it's, how it's supposed to look like in color. So it's a nice figure overall. It's just very, very limited in what it could do. So yeah, you can't really get too crazy with the poses. I think this is kind of like essentially it. The legs don't want to go up any farther than this. When you bend the knee, it's just going to do that. So, I mean, realistically, it seems like this would have been better off not having any articulation. Because it's not really meant to be played with. I think the articulation is kind of more like an afterthought. But it's a good piece overall in terms of, if you wanted something to display. And let's take a look. Let's take a look at him up close. A couple of glamour shots. You see, it's a very photogenic figure. It's just unfortunate that you can't, do certain things with him. Like, it'd be nice if you could at least turn him at the waist, but that's not possible. If I had to describe this guy in one word, I'd essentially say it's very basic, But it's Jim Lee's Batman. It looks like just leaped out of the comic book, so it's a nice figure overall. If this is something that interests you, I'd suggest, hunting it down, but making sure that you don't pay too much for this guy. Like, in my opinion, I don't think you should pay more than like $25 for this on the secondary market. Even then, that might seem a little bit high, but keep in mind this is something that came out in 2018, so its availability might be a little bit scarce. And also, if you find this guy loose, always be kind of cautious about buying, some of these DC collectibles loose. Just because, I don't think the quality control is always the greatest with the DC Direct and DC Collectibles action figures, especially from back in the day. Because I've had issues where, the pins would break on the joints, or the joints themselves would break. All right, so let's wrap this one up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to this channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. All right, later.